They point to the temple. Massive stones, blinding gold, seemingly untouchable. Jesus doesn't admire it. He says, "It's all coming down. Not one stone left on another." What must have sounded unthinkable was inevitable. We're studying Mark 13, 1-2. Let's read verse 1 from the ESV. "And as he came out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, 'Look, teacher, what wonderful stones and what wonderful buildings.'" Jesus and his disciples are leaving the temple for the final time before his arrest. As they're leaving, one of the disciples says something interesting. He gets Jesus' attention by calling to him, "Teacher." Then he bids him to look. Look at what? The next part is significant in the original Greek text. He literally says, "What stones and what buildings," or "such stones and such buildings." He doesn't apply an adjective like wonderful, magnificent, or beautiful. He lets the stones and buildings speak for themselves. If Jesus, or anyone, looks at the stones and buildings, the message will be self-evident. The temple complex is extraordinary. Let's talk about the temple complex in Jesus' day. It was known as Herod's Temple because beginning in about 20 or 19 BC, Herod the Great began a major renovation and expansion of the existing temple complex. The redesign included gleaming white stone and a lot of gold decoration. The splendor of it spoke to God's presence, national permanence, and the security of the covenant between God and Israel. It was a source of comfort and confidence. It's no wonder that a disciple, walking with the Messiah, would look at the temple as a special place. "Teacher, look. What stones and what buildings." Look at Jesus' response in verse 2. "And Jesus said to him, 'Do you see these great buildings? There will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down.'" Jesus starts his response with a question, "Do you see these great buildings?" This is a rhetorical question, with no answer expected. How can we know that? Because the disciple to whom Jesus is speaking just asked Jesus to look at the buildings. Of course, he sees the buildings. The purpose of this rhetorical question is to focus attention on the statement he is about to make, to ensure there is no confusion about what he says next. And what he says next is truly stunning. "There will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. Not a stone left upon a stone. No two stacked stones will remain in place." He's predicting an utter deconstruction of the most magnificent edifice in Israel. To use your family home as an analogy, it's like saying, your house is going to be taken apart to such an extent that every nail will be pulled, and no two pieces that are currently connected will still be connected. Every joined piece will be unjoined so that your house will no longer be a house. It will just be a mass of disconnected and disordered parts. Can you imagine what it must have felt like to hear that? God's house, the source of national identity and pride, the center of spiritual life for a nation, and the man you follow, whom you believe is God's Messiah, has just declared that it will be totally undone. Within a generation, his words would be realized when in 70 AD, Titus would destroy Jerusalem and the temple. Mark has been crafting a predictable framework for this pronouncement by Jesus. First, we were told about Jesus' visit to a fig tree that looked fruitful but was barren, and that Jesus cursed. Next, we were told that Jesus visited the temple, had a good look around, like an investigator, and then left for the night. In the morning, we were back at the fig tree and found that it was utterly withered to the roots, completely undone as fig trees go. And then Jesus returned to the temple, which he called a den of robbers, and drove out all the buyers and sellers from it. This alternating fig tree to the temple narrative shows a judgment process. First, an investigation, then a pause, then an execution of judgment. After that, Jesus had conversations with the leaders of the temple and found them dishonest and unwilling to embrace the truth. Now Jesus says, this place, that looks so permanent, will be as undone as that fig tree. Not a stone left upon a stone. The flow of events set the stage for an execution of judgment on the temple. Finally, This prediction about the temple primes the disciples, as well as Mark's readers, for the rest of chapter 13, which is known as the Olivet Discourse. Jesus goes to the Mount of Olives and sets up an alternative to the Temple Mount, and teaches his disciples about the things to come, the trials and tribulations, and how to be prepared for those things. So what can we take away from these two verses? What looks immovable and permanent to us may already be under judgment. God and his promises are eternal. Buildings, structures, and organizations are subject to change. Place your faith in the God of the temple and his Messiah, not the temple itself. Next time, the original 4 disciples have questions for Jesus. Thanks for studying with me. Let me know what you think of these verses in the comments.